The next thing to do is to perform a percolation test. And there's further information here that will tell you how to find the best location in your yard to do this. But if you'll find the part of the manual that deals with a percolation test, you'll see the just how this soil of yours is going to perform under stress. In the previous steps, we determined roughly how deep we want the garden to be, but a critical element of that is just how much water your soil can pass. Now, remember that in a rain garden, the most important thing is that the bottom be flat. Now, a mistake that I've often seen made in understanding that statement is that it needs to be flat like the floor of your house is flat, like this table is flat, not flat on the same slope as your yard. So if your yard slopes like that, the rain garden needs to be level. So it's a good idea to find an area that's gently sloping in your yard, and you might find that in the upper area of the rain garden, at the higher point in your yard, you might dig it 8 inches deep, and a flat bottom, you'll come out to where it's level with the surface of the ground, where the yard's lower. Well, that's an ideal situation, because when you dig the material out where it's 8 inches deep, you have material then to build a berm on the lower end, and you've used all your material judiciously, and you've got a balance that you don't have to cart anything off. You don't have to dig as much out as well. So but in that case, the berm on the lower end of the garden, or the end of the garden where the yard is lower, might need to be 12 to 14 inches high for the 8 inches, and then a little bit extra for freeboard, and then to build an emergency spillway in. But for the purposes of the percolation test, it's best to approximate the bottom elevation of your garden, and then dig 12 inches deeper than that, a hole about the size of a large coffee can. And so this will allow you to test the performance of the soil down where the plant's roots are going to be. So then, having done that, dug the hole to that depth, fill the hole with water and leave it for an hour. Take a popsicle stick or a tongue depressor and slip it into the side of the hole, as you see here on the diagram, and come back in an hour, and then fill the hole up with water again, and then go have lunch, because 4 hours later you're going to come back. The reason you did that is to allow the soil to saturate, and so you'll see how it'll perform under saturated conditions. Then you measure from the top of that popsicle stick, where you've topped the water off again, and you see how far the level has dropped. Now that'll tell you how this soil is going to perform. You take that number and multiply it by 6, and you allowed it to sit there for 4 hours. You multiply it by 6, will give you 24 hours. It tells you how it'll perform over a 24-hour period. And then with that information, you can test, well, with my 10 inches deep that I wanted to build my garden, this soil might need a little help. I might need to dig it out some more and put some sand in there to make it drain better, or it's just fine. It might even tell you you can build it 6 inches deep. But it's just a verification of the function of the soil. So let's find the section that's headed Soil Modifications. There's some good recommendations on soil mixes to use 50% to 60% sand, 30 to 40% soil, the soil that you dug out. And 5 to 10% of organic material. Again, it's just how your particular test does, and you can add this in if you need to. Turn in the manual to the heading Outline the Garden Perimeter. This is a very low-tech process. Take your garden hose, unhook it from the house, and lay it out on the ground where you think you'd like to have the rain garden. And get the shape. You know, you might want a kidney bean shaped rain garden. You might want some other shape. But it allows you to get an idea of what the size is going to look like on the ground. At the area where you're going to need to build the berm, or where the garden will be, where the berm will be the highest, you need to extend about 3 feet further out, because the berm is going to need to have some width on the bottom. And then from that area, remove the sod and begin digging. You dig it to the depth you want, and you can use different tools. You can rent a surveyor's level, you can use a water level, you can use a carpenter's level. You dig the garden out and get it as flat as what looks like to be flat. It's often visually deceptive, I've found. But then get out a long 2x4 and lay it down and put your carpenter's level on it and see how well you did. And then just dig out a little further and move the board around so you'll get it flat in all directions. And then you've got it, the digging basically done. The material that you dig out then, place up, and first of all, you've removed the topsoil. So what's left is the material that you dug from deeper into the soil. That's going to be more clay soil, and that's perfect for building a berm. The clay particles are much denser, or much more densely packed, and they retard water movement through the dam. So when you're building the berm, you need to tamp it down, and you can do that with a hand tamper, and that's quite difficult for one person to. If you have a troop of Boy Scouts doing it, that's much better if you're the one leaning on the shovel and they're the one tamping. Or you might rent a mechanical tamper. It's a good idea. It's recommended that the garden be proportionally twice as long in one direction as it is in the other. This allows for water traveling through the garden to have a greatest time of residence and contact with the soil. Digging and leveling, you might be hardy enough to do it by hand. You might contract it out. But if you rent material or rent equipment to do it, it's recommended that you use a tracked vehicle instead of a wheeled vehicle, because the compaction of the soil will be minimized that way. At this point, once you get it dug, take a rototiller and till it down 8, 10, 12 inches deep. And at this point, you can add in any soil modifications that you need, sand, mulch, any growing medium that you want to add in. And so you've got it all tilled up, and you've got this beautiful, loamy, receptive medium to plant your plants in. And stabilize the berm. Now, as I said, no matter what size you build your rain garden, you might build it smaller than the water that would come off your roof in a 1-inch rainstorm. Well, if you build a spillway into the dam, and that's done by you leveled your berm, and you find a point where it's going to be able to travel over natural ground once it passes the berm to the natural drainage way. Now you want to make sure that's not back towards your house. You want to make sure it's not towards your neighbor's property. If you're closer than, say, 20 feet from the property line, you don't want to be impacting him. So, but you'll find the natural drainage way, then cut a notch in the top of the dam that's maybe 12 inches wide on the bottom and 4 to 6 inches deep, and a couple of 3 feet wide at the top. So you have a V-shaped configuration. You might want to dig it a little bit deeper than 4 inches and stabilize it with stone, as is seen in this photograph. We found some really nice stone at a vendor here in town, and this is the emergency spillway in their garden. And from another view that extends down the full width of the berm in both directions and is somewhat depressed, and it stabilizes so that if the water does spill over that area, it's not washing away dirt, it's going over the stones. Now, before you start to plant, get all your plants together and put them in groups the way you want them. You've talked to your nurseryman and he's told you, well, now this kind of plant's going to do best down in the bottom of the garden because he likes his feet wet. This guy over here, he doesn't like it so much, so you might put him up on a little shelf in the garden. And then lay the plants out in your garden before you start putting any of them in the ground, and get the spacing right. Get it where it looks just right. Then you can plant them. At that point, you can sit back and enjoy your garden and have a cool glass of iced tea. There are some tips for maintenance. The manual says to label the plants, and that's a great idea, but I recommend that you make a drawing of the garden and label where on your drawing where you've planted the different plants, because come springtime, there's going to be lots of plants in there, both the ones you planted and some other ones that volunteered. You may not want all those. Well, you may not remember where you planted the ones you planted. And another good thing to do is at the end of the previous season, in the first year, take a photograph, and so you'll remember what they looked like. Because, over winter you may have forgotten. So that you can identify those interlopers that have shown up uninvited and pull them out without pulling out the ones you planted there. But this is, you might want to try edging around your garden. You might seed with grass seed or sod your berm. Any number of ways to treat it, because it's after all, it's your garden. Any number of things you can do to enhance it. If it's to personalize it, you might put a piece of sculpture in it. You might find some copper. I found a wonderful brass and copper fountain that I put in my garden. I have to bring it in the wintertime, but it's a great addition to the garden, and it makes it feel like a much more contemplative area than just if it's by itself. So these are things that you can do. They've got some good maintenance tips. But above all, what you've done is what one person can do. From eons of development that have changed the way the earth interacts with stormwater, you've redone what you can do on your lot. Thanks so much.